Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Mad Science Lab on the Fantasy Football Universe. I am Aaron St. Dennis. Follow me everywhere at FF Mad Scientist. Joined today by Shane Barrett. Follow him at FF Shane B. He is here to talk Jacksonville Jaguars today. How's it going, Shane?
It's going well. I even wore the shirt today.
Oh, nice. I couldn't see it till you did that.
Yeah.
I did that. When I first started, I had a big fancy shirt I made, and then I got there and I said, well, shit, you can't even see this unless I tilt the camera, and then you could see the shirt, but you couldn't see my face. I was like, oh, this was a waste of time. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm short enough that all I have to do is like puff up my chest a little bit, and it'll show up. My mom got this for me in the Jacksonville airport last week. So
last year when we did this, I did this series. I'm in Canada, so I'm a big hockey fan. So I have a jersey of every NHL team that's ever played. So what I did was for each show, I wore an NHL jersey of whatever team was, or whatever city, whatever NHL team was closest to that, which worked out really well. People thought it was really cool. The only problem was wearing NHL jerseys in fucking July. I had days where I would record like 6 or 7 shows, and by the end I'd just be like, oh my god, I'm fucking sweat. So the first 3 or 4 shows I'm in an NHL jersey. By show 4 I'm doing the whole show topless because I'm just like, I'm fucking dying here. I can't do this anymore. So no NHL jerseys this year. So before we get into it though, you want to take a second, tell everyone where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So outside of the charity tournament that I run, I am a ranker for
Which one do you run?
I run Polly's Playoff.
Oh, okay, there's so many of them. I'm in like 12. I don't think I'm in that one this year.
Yeah.
So I don't think I've ever been in that one, actually.
Well, come on. Signups are still alive.
I will have to right after this.
Polly's Playoff is a tournament to end Alzheimer's. And this year I started a podcast interviewing people that play in Polly's and kind of talking with them, kind of how they got started playing fantasy football and then how Alzheimer's has affected them. So I need to actually finish editing the episode for this week so I can actually release it. But I've recorded a few of those and posted them. And so you can follow that account at Polly's Playoff on Twitter as well.
So not to be a total asshole here, but the irony of this is I forgot to register for the tournament benefiting Alzheimer's. So there's some irony there. And maybe the funds should be going to me at the end of the tournament. But I'm just saying. So actually, no, that's definitely one I'm going to have to sign up after. Not now, like I've transitioned to a different career. I originally was in nursing. I retired from that, but I can tell you, working in nursing homes, it is not something I ever hope or wish on my worst enemy. Mm-mm. It is absolutely horrible. So it's a great cause, and I'm going to have to try and do my best to remember to sign up right after we're done. Perfect. Let's get into the Jags, though. We may wish we could forget this, but we'll see. Mac Jones already. QB1 here is Trevor Lawrence, 14 last year, going off the board as QB 15 this year. Newly acquired Mac Jones, QB 29 last year, and CJ Beathard. What are your thoughts here? I know we do what we do in fantasy football, and the hatred has swung way too bloody far on Trevor Lawrence. Yeah. I'm not completely in, but he's in that group for me of quarterbacks. Like it's Burrow, it's Lawrence, it's Herbert, Tua. The quarterbacks were this time last year they were mid-range QB1s, and now they're mid-range QB2s. And in Superflex, I don't often stack QBs early, and I kind of like QB2. But when these guys are dropping to me in the 3rd and 4th round, I'm snatching them up all day because I may not be all in. But at this price tag, Trevor Lawrence isn't this bad, even if he is dealing with some Urban Meyer PTSD. What are your thoughts?
I love to make the joke that Trevor Lawrence's rookie year doesn't count because he had the best kicking coach in the league. And we saw him bounce back from year 1 to year 2 once Doug Peterson got there, and he finished his QB 8. And then last year he finished his QB 14, but he was dealing with a bunch of injuries, and he never really got on track with Calvin Ridley. And I thought that was going to be the piece that kind of unlocked the Trevor Lawrence that we saw at Clemson in the NFL to really allow him to step up into that kind of upper echelon that you're talking about, that he's knocking on the door, I think, but he's not there yet. I think this year he's actually got the best set of weapons, which we'll talk about throughout the episode, that he's had in his entire career. And now with the $55 million per year contract, like he's going to have to step up and knock it out of the park this year, or Jacksonville's going to look like Jacksonville has years when it comes to signing players and whatnot. I think he can do it, especially once we get into talking about who his weapons are. And I'm not really worried about Mac Jones threatening him. I think Mac Jones is a great backup for him, but he won't have any value from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah, last season was pretty disappointing, especially Calvin Ridley. You're right, there just wasn't any connection, and it's almost like Calvin Ridley took the under on Trevor Lawrence's season passing
right?
yards or something, because no other answer makes sense. I don't want to throw up conspiracy theories here, but I'm just saying. So we'll get into some of those weapons, though, because it's certainly a lot more competition. Well, not necessarily at running back, but wide receivers. Running back, we've got Travis Etienne. I've been doing so much Devy in college prep. I almost called him Trevor Etienne.
Yeah.
That's how much
fair.
I've been into Devy right now. But Travis Etienne, the older brother, RB4 last year, RB7 off the board this year. Tank Bigsby going way late in drafts. Dearness Johnson even later. Keelan Robinson pretty much undrafted. I think this is obvious that it's a Travis Etienne bell cow situation here. The question is, after giving him an insane workload last year and saying that they're going to ease up on him, this really doesn't look like a situation where they're going to ease up on him. Like, unless they're really high on Tank Bigsby, I got to think this is a 70% plus touch share on the running back touches for ETN. What do you think?
Yeah, so I'm going to come at my answer for this from a kind of a pure football perspective and then try and loop it back into fantasy. From a pure football perspective, it needs to be like a 60-40 snap share percentage with ETN getting the chunk of that. And the reason I say that is I think really for the last 2 years, but especially last year, we've seen how Travis Etienne towards the end of the season has kind of fallen off. And I think it's because he's, like you said, he's been in a workhorse situation. They drafted Tank Bigsby last year, and he didn't have a great rookie year. But I also don't feel like he got used to really know what we have in Tank Bigsby. I'm also an Auburn fan, so I love Tank Bigsby. I think Tank will be that guy that will step up and be that number 2 and help take at least, let's say, 30%, and Dearness and Keelan Robinson can split the other 10. But if it's not Tank, Dearness Johnson or Keelan Robinson is going to have to step up to allow Travis to get off the field some from a football perspective so that the Jags can actually make a deeper playoff run. And it was really like, I made an entire spreadsheet last year because I was pissed off at Press Taylor, the offensive coordinator for the Jags. I think it was if they had 18 carries as a team and ETN had like 14 of them, they won the game. If they had less than that number, they lost the game. And towards the end of the season, they just stopped running the ball with ETN. And it's like, I mean, I get it. His legs are probably dead, but at the same time, you're winning ball games when you're running the football. So I'm hoping that with the addition of new wide receivers and hopefully the stepping up to Tank Bigsby, we do see a little bit of drop off from ETN from a usage standpoint, but hopefully that will also help increase his efficiency.
Yeah, we see that a lot. Like, he tapers off. The extreme happened with Tony Pollard, where he went from a backup to a starter, and we just seen he couldn't hold up to it. I don't think it was that bad for ETN. You could notice he was noticeably less efficient and didn't have nearly as much explosiveness. I like Bigsby. I like Dearness Johnson. I think they both had potential. I don't know what kind of split I want here. As a fantasy guy, if I own ETN, I want 80-20 split, but
right.
in the end, the 60-40 split might be better if it keeps ETN fresh and you assume ETN is still getting all the high value touches and the targets. That 60% could be more valuable for fantasy than the 80% would be, which I know seems counterproductive, but I'd rather have the fresh guy who's getting the valuable touches instead of a guy who's getting burned out between the 20s where he's not scoring for me anyways.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing with Tank is like, I watched him a lot and I thought as they're running, I thought him coming out of college, he could have easily been one of the guys that could be a 3-down back, and then he landed in Jacksonville. So from a real football perspective, I was like, yay. But from a fantasy football, I was like, dang it. Because I think Tank has the ability to be a 3-down back. So he could spell Travis in a couple of different ways, I think. But still, like you said, keep Travis efficient.
All right, moving on to the wide receivers. We have an interesting room here. Christian Kirk, wide receiver 44 last year, going off the board at wide receiver 32. That's interesting. I know they moved on from Calvin Ridley, but they brought in Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr., who I would argue are probably an upgrade. At least combined, they're an upgrade, but
Yeah.
okay, whatever. Brian Thomas Jr. going off the board, wide receiver 49. I think he's one of those ultimate boom or bust potential here. I think he has the potential to be awesome. He could also really suck. Gabe Davis, your ultimate best ball target, where he's going to put up 4 touchdowns in a game and then he's going to disappear for 3 games. Parker Washington, Devin Duvernay, Denzel Mims, Elijah Cooks, Austin Trammell, Tim Jones. So we've got some depth fillers here. It's mainly just the top 3. Actually, I liked Parker Washington last year. Duvernay's got some value if you count, like in a assuming they use him like they did in Baltimore. Scott Fishbowl.
I was going to say that too.
Returns. Devin Duvernay's not off the board here. And that might actually help him because if he's returning kicks, he might be in the game where, Parker Washington's a healthy scratch. But I think for everyone, it's the top 3 here. I'm probably I think I have the least shares of Christian Kirk. I don't really actively target any of these guys, but I find Kirk's going too early. Thomas Jr. is probably going too early. Gabe Davis, I've always been out on, but I've had a few shares of Davis this year just because he's like, I'm getting him in like the 15th round of drafts where I'm going, shit, if he's a hit, he's free. If not, oh, well, it's a 15th rounder. So what are your thoughts here on the basically the top 3 receivers, but anyone else if you think there's relevance?
Yeah, for the top 3, I mean, I think the guy you want is pretty easily Kirk, but like you said, he's probably going a little early. But he's got that familiarity with Trevor and will continue to have that. So I think he's going to get a ton of targets.
Did he miss time last year?
He was hurt.
A bad year?
No, he was hurt last year.
Okay, I thought so. I seen wide receiver 44, and I was like, I don't feel like he was that bad last year, but
no, he was hurt. I do not remember how many games he missed, but that was another thing that I feel like contributed to Lawrence's year is he didn't have Kirk the whole year. He played in.
Oh, you got it? I was going to look it up.
He played in 12 games, it looks like.
Okay, so he missed 5.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
So, yeah, 12. It's right there. Dummy. So played in 12 games. I think he's a huge bounce back candidate because he does have that familiarity and that chemistry with Trevor. I think he'll be a target hog. I don't know how many touchdowns he'll score, but he's going to get you targets and yards pretty much every single game. And then it comes to the clones. I really think Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabe Davis are very, very similar. I actually argued with somebody on draft night that Gabe Davis is a better route runner, and I will still stand by that because there is a yards per separation or yards per target of separation stat. I can't remember exactly what it's called on Player Profiler. And Gabe Davis, every year he's been in the league, has been top 24. Even if the separation that he has created has increased, his rank hasn't necessarily, just because other people have separated more somehow, but he's creating space. And that's what matters to me. So I love him as a route runner, and where you're getting him in drafts, I think I'll go Gabe Davis over Brian Thomas Jr. I really, really want Brian Thomas Jr. to hit just as a fan, but I'm so like lockstep with you where it's like, he's either going to be a great player or he's going to fall flat on his face. Like before the draft, I was really getting Terrence Marshall Jr. vibes from Brian Thomas Jr. And that scares me.
Yeah, like he has the potential. I think he could be awesome. It's one of those players like it was Treylon Burks, it was Quentin Johnston. There is absolute wide receiver 1 potential. There is also XFL potential. So it's not a spot where he's not just going to settle in and be a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3. He's either going to be freaking awesome or he's going to be terrible. And I don't think there's much room for in between. But having said that, that kind of fits with the theme here. Gabe Davis is not exactly your consistent 12 points a game. He's 40 or 0. So kind of fits. We'll move on here to the tight ends. We have Evan Engram, who was a freaking monster last year. Was like 7th overall in Scott Fishbowl scoring with, triple tight end premium. Tight end 8 in normal leagues, going off the board as 7 this year. Kind of in that safe tier of tight ends right before we get into the Dalton Schultz of the world. followed by Brenton Strange, Luke Farrell, Josiah DeGora. So I love Ingram. I think he's appropriately priced. Do you worry that the new faces in the receiving core are going to impact him, or is he a consistent, tight end one here?
I think he'll be a consistent tight end one here. I don't think his skill set and their skill sets mesh like on the same kind of level of what they do, to where he'll be able to be that target over the middle with Kirk and kind of be that safety blanket for Trevor, and also be a red zone threat. Now that they may clash a little bit with Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabe Davis, but I don't think it'll matter too much. I think they're going to be, I'm hoping they'll throw the ball a little more this year and be more successful, despite my spreadsheet.
Awesome. All right. Moment of truth here. One target and one avoid on this roster at their current price tag.
Okay, I'll go avoid first. I think I'm going to avoid Brian Thomas Jr. just because there's so much unknown on him that I'm not ready to commit to him.
I think the target for me is easy, and it's right here. It is Trevor Lawrence. He's one where I like him as my QB2 because he falls. Even in a single QB league, I think I'd probably draft him for free because he's a free second quarterback, which you're going to need at some point. So sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, that matches. I know this is probably more redraft focus, but from a dynasty perspective, I've bought a couple shares of Trevor Lawrence this offseason. I really think with the weapons that he has, the contract he got, and he and his wife are pregnant, like he's got a lot to play for this year. From a narrative perspective, I think he'll step up and do it. So I'll go Trevor Lawrence. Some honorable mentions for this would be probably ETN, Kirk, and Evan Ingram.
Oh, that's an interesting thing you bring up. I originally started with fantasy hockey, and I know I used to have a stat for those, like a whole list of players who had babies in the off season, and their seasons really tanked because they don't fucking sleep that year. So for me, I always dinged a guy who had a baby that off season. So hopefully it doesn't hold true for Lawrence.
Well, I think they're probably like 20 weeks right now, so we'd have to do the math later, but figure out when they have it, and then maybe after that or right before that, sell Trevor.
Nice. All right, let's get to the fun part here. I'll go through the schedule. You tell me win or loss.
Okay.
You're going to need 13 wins or 12 wins to make the playoffs based on everyone else's projection, just so you know that.
Cool.
11 games will have you second last in the AFC. All right, we're going to start at Miami.
I'm going to call that a loss.
All right, home to the Brownies.
We'll call that a W.
Ooh, I think I had those first two games reversed. But week 3 at Buffalo.
I'm going to call that a loss.
All right, week 4 at Houston.
I'm also going to call that a loss.
Week 5, home to the Colts.
Win.
All right, week 6 at the Bears.
Win. That one is London game, and so is the next one.
Yeah. Weeks. I just have it the way it comes up on the schedule. So it says week 7, home to the Patriots, but it's not really home.
London.
Well, I guess it is. They're the Jags.
They're the London Jags, right?
Yeah. So
even though we did get a new deal to stay in Jacksonville, that's a W.
All right, you got them above 500. Week 8, home to Green Bay.
I think that'll be tough, but I'm going to call that a W.
All right, week 9 at Philly.
I'm going to call that one a dub too.
Ooh, spicy. Week 10, home to the Vikings.
That'll be a dub.
All right, week 11 in Detroit.
I'm going to call that a loss.
Okay, you were starting to lose me there for a second.
I couldn't decide. I think Philly and Detroit will probably split those.
All right, week 13, home to the Texans.
That's a win.
Spicy. Week 14 at Tennessee.
I haven't kept up with what we're at this point from a record standpoint, but I don't think Tennessee will be that good, so I'm going to call that a dub.
All right. Week 15, home to the Jets.
Also a dub.
Yeah. All right. Week 16 at Vegas.
That'll be a dub. Oh, that'll be tough.
Week 17, home to the Titans.
All right, this will be the last win, but that's a dub.
Okay, and week 18 at the Colts. You said that's a loss?
I think that'll be a loss.
All right, congratulations. You have them in a 9-way tie at 12-5.
No way. I tried so hard not to.
Every single team is going 12-5 this year. And it's funny because I call people out before the show even starts. And I'm going to be realistic. I'm not going to be a homer. And then I'm sitting there, I'm going, you had about 4 games left. And I'm going, he's going to have these guys 13-3 in a second here. If you would call the Colts a win, you would have them being the first place Jaguars.
I don't think it's out of the question. Just because, like, okay, Chicago, New England, Minnesota, and I think Tennessee, both games of Tennessee, like, those to me almost feel like locks for wins. The question marks I have are basically all the road games. Cleveland.
Ooh. I have them at 9 wins myself.
Okay. And that's a totally, I could see that. So let me see if I can figure it out. So you said you had Miami as a win. We'll call Cleveland a loss, Buffalo a loss, Houston a loss.
Yep.
Home against Indy.
3 wins in a row here.
Okay, that's what I figured. Lose against Green Bay.
Yep.
Lose against Philly.
Yep.
Win against Minnesota.
Yep.
Lose against Detroit.
Uh-huh.
Lose against Houston.
Yep.
Win against Tennessee.
Yep.
Win against the Jets.
Yep.
I'm not counting. Win against the Raiders.
Yep.
Win against Tennessee.
Yep.
Lose against Indy.
Yep. Those are the exact 9 wins.
Yep.
That's exactly what I had. So
I could see that happening. Like seriously, Miami, Cleveland, Buffalo, both Houston games, Philly, Detroit, and one of the Colts games feel like toss-ups or even L's. So I totally see that happening.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me. Before we wrap this up, you want to take another second here to tell everyone where they can find you and your work?
Yeah. So you guys can follow me on Twitter at FFShaneB, and my charity tournament and podcast is at Polly's Playoff on Twitter. Make sure you sign up at pollysplayoff.com.
Sounds great. Thank you, Shane, for joining me. If anybody wants to check out these team pages, not just Jacksonville, we have all of them. Head over to fantasyfootballuniverse.com and check them out. We will be back tomorrow with the Atlanta Falcons. I have Jay Allwine of Player Profiler. Thanks again to Shane for joining me, and thank you all for tuning in. Take care and have a great night.